Hello, I'm Andrea Lipinski.
And I'm Keith DeCandido, and this is the Chronic Rift.
In a little while, we'll be taking a look at the works of another literary notable, Anne McCaffrey, in our roundtable discussion. Do you like gifts? We do. In fact, we like giving them as much as we like receiving them, and we have an offer for you. Send us your name, address, and an optional evening phone number on a postcard to the first annual grab bag contest of the Chronic Rift. First prize will get a whole lot of stuff. Keith, tell them.
Well, among the stuff you will get are a copy of Comics Interview number 100, which will tell you who the 100 most powerful people in the comics industry are, various books donated by Baen Books, Tor Books, and Daw Books, three of our sponsors, your very own copy of Ron Goulart's Encyclopedia of American Comics from 1897 to the present, various comic books of a Star Trek nature donated by DC Comics, a Worlds of Wonder videotape. You'll get 4 Chronic Rift episodes of your choice on a VHS videotape, and a whole bunch more which we will announce as we go on. We also, even if you don't want to enter the contest, we would like to ask you to send in your name and address anyway, because we'd like to know how many people are actually watching the show. So please, write in. If you don't want to be in the contest, just say, I don't want to be in the contest.
But there are also second and third prizes of various books. Entries must be received by November 29th, 1991. The winner will be announced on our holiday episode in December. And now, here with his comic art commentary is your friend and mine, Keith DeCandido.
I'm your friend? Really? Wow. Anyway, welcome to Comic Art Commentary. There are 4 big awards in the comics field: the Harveys, the Eisners, the Comics Buyer's Guide Fan Poll, and a new one, the Diamond Gem Award. They're very easily divided into 2 parts. 2 of them tell you what's good, 2 of them tell you what makes a lot of money. The Harveys, named after Mad Magazine creator Harvey Kurtzman, are voted on by comics creators and editors. The Eisners, named after Spirit creator Will Eisner, are voted on by creators and comics industry employees, which is a slightly wider pool. They both represent what's best in the field. The big winners this year were publishers like Fantagraphics Books and Eclipse Books. The Comics Buyer's Guide Fan Awards represent what CBG's readers like, and since CBG panders to the lowest common denominator, so do their awards. Marvel Comics was the big winner this year, winning in all but 2 of the categories. However, they make a very important distinction. The CBG awards are favorite writer, favorite artist, favorite editor, not best. That's a distinction that some people miss. The most offensive of these are Diamond's Gem Awards. These awards are given out by Diamond Distributors, who are one of the biggest distributors of comics, and they're all listed as best, but what they really reward are the things that make the most money. Marvel, who has an 80% market share, won Publisher of the Year. Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man #1, whose sales figures were in the millions, was Best New Comic under $3, and Best Promotional Campaign for its multiple covers. Dark Horse, which is the company with the largest market share that isn't Marvel or DC, won Best Independent Publisher. Now, there's nothing wrong with rewarding somebody for making a lot of money, but you should say that rather than trying to make it best. No one even in their wrong mind would consider Todd McFarlane's pathetic attempt at writing to be the best anything, except maybe the best example of winning the CBG Fan Poll Award for Best Artist going to one's head. This week's comic in review is Heartthrobs, written and drawn by Max Cabanes, translated by Elizabeth Bell, published by Catalan Communications. Most European comics, which Catalan is a very large disseminator of, are very long on art, but short on story. An example is Billy Budd's KGB, which has incredible art by Francois Bouc, but a really moronic spy story by Jerome Charon. Cabanes is one of the exceptions. Heartthrobs follows Maxie from being a young boy of 8 to all the way up through being a teenager, told in short vignettes that are named after the women in them. It's basically a chronicle of Maxie's lust. It appears to be typical male coming-of-age bullshit, but like most European films and some European comics, it turns the convention on its ear. Maxie never comes of age. He starts out as an obnoxious 8-year-old who kills a rooster by throwing a rock at it, and advances to a drooling adolescent who hangs out with other drooling adolescents. At first glance, it seems sexist. Most of the women are little more than male fantasy versions of women, but on closer scrutiny, the men don't come off too good either. Besides, the art is beautiful, very painterly, and it manages a perfect combination of hyper-realism with expressionism. You can go from the near photographic look of a street or people sitting in a church to one character named de Preville, who's a caricature with this huge bulging nose and wide ears, and very silly. Heartthrob, the characters in this aren't necessarily noble or heroic. Some of them don't even remotely resemble noble or heroic, but they're almost depressingly real. Heartthrobs is published by Catalan Communications, 83 pages, $15.95 in paperback, and is available at comic shops and directly by mail from the publisher. So that's it for Comic Art Commentary this week. Next week, I will be looking at a book publisher that's getting into comics, as well as a review of Eddie Campbell's Dead Face. Doing the Islands with Bacchus. Back to you, Andrea.
Thank you, dear.
You're welcome.
Now joining us is Jim Frenkel. Jim is an editorial consultant, an agent, and a packager who joins us this week with news and reviews from the world of science fiction and fantasy literature.
Hi, I'm Jim Frenkel, reporting live on science fiction and fantasy from Midtown Manhattan. It's the end of the summer, and that means that we're well into the season of awards for science fiction and fantasy. You already know who won the Science Fiction World Hugo Awards, and next month we'll find out who wins the World Fantasy Awards for the best fantasy books of the year. Meanwhile, it used to be 20 or 30 years ago when I was a small child, you would have 3 or 4 science fiction books coming out a month and nobody even knew what fantasy is. Now, because we are in the fertile 90s, we have bunches and bushel loads of books for you and lots of surprising presents for everybody of every possible persuasion. First, we have The Rainbow Abyss by Barbara Hambly, who is well known for her fantasy books, and we also have a book called The Rowan by Anne McCaffrey. Anne McCaffrey has done something that no one thought anyone could do. She started out as a science fiction writer and continues to write science fiction, but has everyone believing it's fantasy, and they love it. Hundreds of thousands of her fans love it, more every day. Hers is a nice mix of romance, adventure, and excitement, and she shows no sign of slowing down at this point. After Anne McCaffrey, it's kind of downhill from there, but it would be no matter who we were talking about, and what we have is something by Christopher Stasheff, something different called A Company of Stars. Stasheff is well known, of course, for his Warlock series, which make everyone laugh till they get pains in their stomach. But this, I don't think, is quite as funny as his Warlock books, but it promises to be a very exciting series and be very rewarding for many of his fans. And the last book we have this month that we have a visual on here is The Silent Stars Go By James White. James White is known for his books about medicine in space, but this is a complete departure from Mr. White, who is an Irishman himself and betrays his heritage in this book. Apparently we have here a redux of what Patricia Keneally started out as Celts in Space. Yes, James White has Irish people going into space and loving every second of it. It's a wonderfully heartfelt adventure and something that I think people will be pleasantly surprised by. But that isn't where it ends. We have something that no one's ever seen before in this country, a novella published by a trade publisher that is really going to be a big impact book. It's called Heads by Greg Bear, and it's coming out from St. Martin's Press, imported from England, where they're doing a whole series of novellas by big-name science fiction writers. We also have a lot of things for a lot of different people, like Wild Cards number 9. If you haven't seen Wild Cards, you have no idea what it is, except all I can say is it's kind of like a comic inside a science fiction novel written by a bunch of different people who all seem to get along in wacky, wild, mysterious ways. And this is the 9th one, and it's getting better, not worse. So I suggest you look for it. Then there is Arthur C. Clarke. You may have heard of him. He's got a story collection out called More Than One Universe, and it's really a terrific story collection because it's got all sorts of stories from all sorts of books. It's really kind of the best of Arthur C. Clarke. Then there's a little number called Nightfall by Asimov and Silverberg. If you haven't heard of these people, I don't know where you've been for the last 50 years. They've only written about 550 science fiction and fantasy books between them, mostly science fiction, not to mention about 300 nonfiction books, half of which appear under different names. If you're not tired yet, there's Sherry Tepper, who has been carving out a niche for herself as a terrific feminist science fiction writer. She's got a book called Raising the Stones, which was a hardcover from Bantam, Spectra, Foundation, Doubleday, whoever, and now it's a paperback from the same people. If you're still not tired, we have a wonderful book called The Dragon Reborn from Tor Books by Robert Jordan, who's written 2 books in the Wheel of Time series that everyone seems to feel is about as close to J.R.R. Tolkien as you can get without being J.R.R. Tolkien. And I must say, it is very, very good. And for people who are familiar with Stephen Bruce's Hungarian fantasies, The Phoenix Guards is coming out in hardcover again, and this is really something special for his fans. And for you hard science fiction buffs, there's Lara Niven's In Space, which is now coming in paperback from Tor. I could talk on and on about this, but I think I'll stop here and let you go to the store and buy some of these things. Thanks a lot.
According to her book's bios, Anne McCaffrey was born on April 1st and has spent the rest of her life trying to live up to that birth date. McCaffrey was the first woman to win a Hugo, which she won for Ware Search in 1967, and also the first to win a Nebula for Dragon Rider in 1968. She's best known as the creator and author of the Dragon Riders of Pern series. Taking place on an Earth colony that has devolved technologically, the Pern series incorporates elements of fantasy and science fiction and has proven enormously popular. Her Pern work has abated of late, and she has concentrated on other themes, including music, which she has studied extensively, and telepathy, which is a theme in her latest book, The Rowan. With Andrea and me to discuss this very popular author are, over on my right next to Andrea, P.M. Griffin, author of the Star Commando series, who was last on when we discussed Ursula K. Le Guin back in April of this year. Over on my left is Susan Allison, Vice President in charge of science fiction at Berkeley Books, one of McCaffrey's publishers. And remotely on the phone is Jody Lynn, who has collaborated with McCaffrey on a bunch of novels and has also written a reference guide to the world of Pern. You there, Jody?
Yes, I am.
Oh, good. Okay. The book you wrote about Pern, how did that come about? Was that a thing that you did as a fan on your own, or was it commissioned by Del Rey?
No, it was a concept created by Bill Fawcett, who had already done the pictorial guide to Castle Amber, and he brought this project to Del Rey. Since I had already collaborated with Anne, gotten her permission to do 2 Chosen Path adventures, also a project of Bill Fawcett's through Tor Books. I might interject here that I am married to Bill Fawcett, but he wouldn't have given me the project if he didn't think I could handle it. I was selected to be the writer on the project, and Todd Hamilton, who had done all of the illustrating for the Crossroads Chosen Path Adventure series, to be the main illustrator, and James Klaus, who had also been on the Crossroads project to do maps and other technical drawings for the project. And it was brought to Del Rey, and they approved it, and then we went about the business of constructing it. We spent 10 days interviewing Anne at her home in Ireland, and Todd played police artist, drawing the dragons as per her instructions and particular dimensions.
Okay. McCaffrey's always been very close to the fans. Has that affected her popularity? I mean, has that helped her popularity any as a writer by being so well connected with the fans?
I'm not sure that's measurable, but I think you'd have to say it probably has. She's a lovely woman, and she gives of herself very generously, in spite of being tired and jet-lagged most of the time at American conventions. She's also extremely generous with quotes and help for young writers. She's very approachable. She's someone that we frequently turn to if we have a promising manuscript and it needs a little help to get it on the way. And I think for all those reasons, her natural goodness and generosity as a person, which shines through in the books as well, certainly helps to make her popular.
The Pern books are very popular. And that was almost all she did for a while there. She hasn't been doing as many of them lately. Do you think there are any more Pern stories left? Really? Do you think?
Well, considering that she went through the history of Pern, not just the one set of characters, but she went a way back, she moved around. I'm sure she could come up with infinite number of stories, since humanity itself is really infinite.
And I would certainly think that Ray would encourage you to do so.
Well, there is that, yes. Speaking of which, she's also published by a lot of people all at the same time, and she has rather tremendous output for 4 different publishers. Does that affect the way you have to...
It certainly means that publishers want to pay attention to her schedules, both here and in England. I mean, don't forget the British publishers,
right.
Particularly in the hardcover market. If they have British imports suddenly come in and there are 500 hardcovers come in from England, that can have an impact on our hardcover sales, too. The Rowan, which I'm happy to say hits the New York Times list at number 12 next week. We just got that news in 2 days. We certainly made an effort not to run into any of the Del Rey publications, either in hardcover or in paper, and with the next book coming up, which is called Damia, and the manuscript is just in, we've been in contact with Del Rey, found out about their schedule for All the Weirs of Pern, which is the next Pern novel, and we've had big battles with Transworld, her British publisher, about when they're going to do the hardcover. So there's a lot of give and take about trying to cooperate among publishers.
What are the advantages for her, for McCaffrey, for having 4 different publishers?
for 5 or 6 or however many it ends up being.
Well, I think an author writes both to express stories she has inside her and to make a living, and probably not because she plays us off against each other, but because she has constant demand for her work. As long as she doesn't sign herself up for more things than she has the time to do, then it's good. It keeps her sort of fully employed. I mean, it's a nice thing to have many publishers, because most publishers can't really bring out a major novel by a major author in hardcover more than once a year, maybe once every 9 months.
Jody, you've collaborated with her. The old question the collaborators get asked, what was that like? I mean, how was it working with her?
It was marvelous experience working with her. She is very generous and very encouraging, so that shy as I was, and I still am even after several books, it was always easy. She's willing to listen and build on your own ideas. So everything is as if it's very new, and she's been working in the business for so long. It's as if she's a much honored presence.
There's something Evelyn Waugh once said about how 2 people collaborating on a book is to him like 3 people collaborating on a baby, and I always wondered what was the process, the physical process of collaboration between the 2 of you?
Well, because of the distance involved, we would collaborate on the outlines together, and then I would take it home and work out the first draft, and I would send it to her, and she would work out the second draft, and then it would go back and forth with particular questions. We haven't been able to sit down at a typewriter together for the interim stuff, just the early parts and the last parts.
Okay. McCaffrey has been sort of a pioneer in the sense that she was the first to win these awards. There's been some argument about whether she's a feminist or not. Her female...
I'm sorry, you keep cutting in and out.
I'm sorry. There's been an argument as to whether she is a feminist author or not. Do you think, Pauline, that she is? And if not, what is she?
Frankly, I don't care about labels on authors. What she is an extremely good author. Many of her female roles are what would be called traditional. However, her females are both unusual and strong and unique, with one possible exception, one book. I mean, her Helva was part woman, part starship. Very unique concept, came off very well. Sarah in Restore never went out swinging swords and things like that. She, however, she came off as a very distinct and very strong and able and also very human character. The only one where I would object to the kind of role women were given because of its nature, even more so than the fact that they had such a small part to play, was in Decision on Duna, where they had exciting things to do like learning to cook. But that book was a father-son relationship as well. It was really about the little boy as told from the father's point of view, so maybe the mother and daughter got short-shifted somehow or other. That's the only one I kind of made a face at when I was reading. Other than that, I mean, I don't care whether she's a feminist or she isn't. She does a good job, and you can respect her women and like them.
Yeah, no, a lot of her books have strong female characters or center around female characters, but they're not necessarily domineering.
Right.
They're just strong, and that's fine.
Though in The Rowan, the main thrust of the first half of the book is that because she's such a strong woman, she's lonely. There's no man who can be her companion because she's this terribly strong telepath, and the men are terrified of her, and there's no one there that she can turn to, and finally she finds a man who she can love. So it's in a way a traditional love story, but it's kind of interesting that the woman is so strong that she's the one who's keeping the men away by virtue of her power and her standing in the community, which is very, very high.
Right. I was just reading Merida, Dragon Lady of Pern, and in that she doesn't even get to really choose her own mate. It's sort of, whoever's dragon mates with her dragon.
She has to mate with him.
Yeah.
Right.
That's part of the whole
the ritual, right?
The entire world she created is actually a rather impressive bit of world creating, and she's been able to sort of go back on it. Like Merida, for example, was something that had been established as a legend in previous books, and she decided, hey, let's go and write about it.
Right, so see, the possibilities are infinite. They can go back to the legends, the things that were legends in Merida's time, or the things that will happen 5,000 years from the present.
And she doesn't just deal with one class of people. Of all the books, apart from the very, very first, my favorite were the ones in Harper Hall. With Menely, the Harper girl. how she first got to the trip, and then just the excitement of having her talent accepted. I, as a writer, maybe could appreciate that. Just the fact that not only was it blossoming, but it was appreciated, and she was able to see it grow and to learn how to let it grow. I found those Harper Hall books more interesting, perhaps, than any of the other ones about the Dragon Riders.
Do you think that the aspect of the of telepathy and the contact between the riders and their dragons helps make the books popular for people? I mean, helps, instead of just, well, we have people and then we have these dragons that are just sort of these mythical things that fly by, to have that contact. I think it makes the dragons seem more real and it makes the whole story more personable.
Oh yes, I think that they're a great help. They were for me. The interrelationship between the dragons and their riders is absolutely wonderful. I know very well that I would give anything to sneak into a hatching and grab my own dragon.
Yeah.
Even if I had to spend the first several months scrubbing it.
Right.
Yeah, that is a problem. You have to sort of boil it in oil or whatever it is you have to do to it in order to keep it from cracking open.
Right.
But some of the other things she's done, Jody, the second book in the Sassenach series, that was something separate. That was a science fiction thing, and you sort of came in the middle of that. Was that a little more difficult?
Excuse me?
The Sassenach series, the second book in that, you worked on, I blanked on the title, Death's something.
The Death of Sleep.
That one.
Yes.
You were sort of coming into the middle of that, because that was something she had already started with someone else.
Actually, it's not quite true. Lindsay, the Death of Sleep is chronologically the first book in the trilogy. But Elizabeth Moon ended up writing two of them, so they put me in the middle so it didn't look as if I had been hired and fired for the project.
Yes, well, that would not look good.
So it was not difficult to come into the middle of it because all three books were discussed and created at the same time. The three outlines were prepared at once. And Elizabeth and I worked closely together so that our representations of Lindsay and Sassenach and the other characters who appeared would be consistent.
That always helps. Yeah. Is it hard to market McCaffrey, or is it easy to market her just because she's such a known presence? Does that, on the one hand, it could be a lot easier just because she's a known presence. On the other hand, is it
It's
difficult
a lot
to market?
easier.
It is.
It's very easy to sell someone like Anne McCaffrey. The audience is built in. The challenge is to give the books a look that sets them aside from the look she has already from Del Rey, and yet that appeals to the readership that has found her so lovable and wonderful all these years. But certainly, going into a bookstore with a book in your hand that's an Anne McCaffrey title, you don't have to worry about convincing the bookstore that they should buy this. They're delighted to see it, and that's a great pleasure as an editor, as a publisher, as a salesperson, I'm sure, too.
But would they be more willing if it's something, for example, in an established trend of hers, like another Pern book? Then you specifically have all the Pern fans that would go get it. I mean, what if she just comes forward with a book just completely out of left field, but it's still by her? Would that be as
Well,
easy?
that would still be an easy sell because she has a very proven track record. Certainly, I expect that the booksellers are more happy with a new Pern book than anything else because they have more track record on Pern than they do with anything else. But they certainly came to this book, and we hope they'll come to Damia, the next book, as well. Because they have faith in her. They know that over many years she's proven to be popular, and it's not just the Pern, it's also the dinosaur. I mean, there have been other things that she's done. The Duna book, which Jody is now writing a sequel to along with her. So there have been lots and lots of things that McCaffrey has done over decades that have been successful. I think stores would welcome anything that she decided to do.
Can you tell us a little bit about these new books that are coming out?
Well, The Rowan is a book about telepathy. It's a book about a very strong woman character who's a powerful telepath. And it really becomes a generational saga. The next book, Damia, is the story of the daughter of this woman and who is even a more powerful telepath and how she manages. So the third book, we've not yet got anything in on, but I think it will continue the direction the first two have gone in. There's a lot of color, there's a lot of relationships with animals, which she's so good at, not just the dragons and dinosaurs, but also the animals that are in these books. And there's a good deal of romance. I think she's very good at that. The way people get away with loneliness, the way they find affection, familial affection too, not just sex and romance, but the affection of families and the creation of a family unit out of loneliness that makes people feel they belong somewhere, which is really a good theme for her, I think.
Where or when are these books going to be set?
When? Well, far future, and they are on various planets, and Callisto, there's an Earth station. There are various stations all around. The deal is that these people who are telepaths actually operate lifting cargo to and from the various space stations. So it's a very powerful, important kind of stevedore job they do. It's not just some airy-fairy female thing they do. It's tough. It's physically tough. So there's one major, what they're called primes, these telepaths, one major one on each of the planets, and they take care of very important work. And finding a new and powerful telepath of this sort is very difficult. So when one is born, it's a big deal, and they're trained properly and brought along. So there's a lot of complexity to the world. There are a lot of different planets involved. But it is definitely science fiction. It's less fantasy-like, I think, than the other books are, really.
Do you think there's any danger of her going into doing what, say, C.J. Cherry's done with Merovingian Nights or some of the others, or Marion Zimmer Bradley with The Darkover, is having just editing and having other people come in and do, say, Pern books or do books in her world?
Talk to Jody, I don't know.
Do you think, Jody, that there's any danger of that happening?
Danger of what happening?
Of her going the way of, say, Merovingian Nights or the Darkover books, of having them, have other people write Pern stories?
No, I don't think so. They are her own vision of a very special series to her, and she's very careful how she allows it to be used. I don't think that she would, right now the fan writers have a gentleman's agreement that they have so far maintained that they don't use her characters when they write their own stories. And I think that it will be continuing to be hands-off, Anne only, and I think it's wisest.
Okay, that's all we've got time for. Thank you all very much. Jody, thank you for coming on the phone. And thank you too also. Next week we'll be talking about time paradoxes. And it will be next week unless we have a time paradox, in which case it'll be some other time. But we will see you then. Good night.
Good night.
This episode was sponsored in part by Comics Interview, the magazine where both the fans and the pros turn to see who's who and how it's done. Read Comics Interview number 100 and see who the 100 most powerful people in the comics industry are. For a free catalog, write to Comics Interview, 234 Fifth Avenue, Suite 301, New York, New York, 10001. Omega Zone, a store specializing in comic books and video movie rentals, including science fiction, horror, animation, and cult films you won't find at your local video store. Now at a new location, 258 West 15th Street, between 7th and 8th Avenues, in Manhattan. Telephone 212-645-6941. Sassenach, The Death of Sleep, and Generation Warriors are the Sassenach Saga. The Planet Pirates haven't got a chance. Watch for Partnership by Anne McCaffrey and Margaret Ball, coming in March 1992. And Barrier by Hugo Award winner Lois McMaster Buchholz, coming in October 1991, both from Baen Books.